I wish everybody could see it, and you know I'm gonna have to because I cannot hear it. I think this song, and maybe this record in general, is a show that you can literally bust your ass off and not make a single good sound, which is why it's important to work smarter and not harder. I'm feeling a strong 2 to a light 3. On this record. I think it had an interesting vibe and aesthetic to it, and it did have its moments where it subdued me with its lean flavored charms. But if you're not into these Atlanta crooners that aren't really saying anything lyrically over these trap style instrumentals and are subsisting mostly on a diet of lean, then you're probably not going to get that much out of this project. I, however, just thought some moments were really catchy. I thought a lot of the instrumentals were very sweet, and I thought that it bordered on being an interesting listen from the standpoint of, whoa, this is a really druggy, just thick, hazy, intoxicating record. Beyond that, I don't really think Future has much of anything going on this record. I'm feeling a strong 5 to a light 6 on this. Overall, I thought this project was okay. A few tracks were decent, a handful were great. Some of them could have gotten thrown into the recycle bin. It just feels like a little bit of a compilation, nothing too big or significant. And it's because it's not really that ambitious of a project. Drake and Future kind of go into each track with almost the same sound and the same aesthetic and the same vibe. Some of the tracks are harder, some of them are a little softer, and they just kind of give us a hit here, a hit there, some misses. It's just a little all over the place. It doesn't seem like their intentions going into it were that big. And as a result, I don't think it came out as great as it possibly could have been, because Drake and Future right now, they're at the top of their games. And I guess what's kind of sad is that the potential in them collaborating wasn't really fully explored. We just kind of got some short, enjoyable tracks. I'm feeling a light to decent 6 on this thing. Pick up aesthetic qualities to these tracks, but they all kind of sound boring when you have to listen to them one after another in an 11-track succession. I guess with Future's music, it's best to just be doing something else more fun than sitting down and listening to Future's music. It's kind of like ambient hip-hop in a way. You know, it's just supposed to hang in the background while you're doing something that you could be potentially arrested for. It won't distract you from your illegal activity. It's not too loud or interruptive to the point where anybody's going to be calling anybody over like a noise ordinance or anything like that. You know, it's just hanging back there, setting the mood. I'm feeling a strong 5 to a light 6. It's pretty underwhelming. I could see you being into it if you're a hardcore fan of each artist, or if you're looking for some very simple, vibey trap music to just put on that you're not going to think all that much about. Overall, I would say putting these guys together on a full length has been pretty fruitless. Far from a game changer. And the whole thing just kind of sounds like the musical equivalent to networking and just kind of sharing in shared audiences. It's mostly kind of listenable, but I'm indifferent toward a lot of it, and I wouldn't return to this thing outside of a couple tracks. I'm feeling a light to decent 5 on. It's passable. It has the bare bones elements that make a Future release listenable, make it decent as like background music. But after listening to this thing, I don't know. I'm not sure if there's a more uninspired rapper walking the planet than Future right now. Because with every new release he drops, whether it be something potentially career-defining like this as he self-titles it, or even a release like, you know, with Drake, What a Time to Be Alive. You know, it seems like there'd be no better opportunity to, you know, kind of get yourself out of your comfort zone. With every new release he drops, he just folds his arms and he says, I'm gonna do the same thing I always do. I'm pretty indifferent toward this thing. I'm feeling a light to decent 5. Future doing an album like this is that he's terrible at singing. He's terrible at writing lyrics that invoke any kind of feelings of love or intimacy or romance or sensuality. How his voice could even set the mood for anybody, I don't know, because it's so goofy. I wanna go to the rich sex. I wanna get rich sex. I wanna get rich sex. I wanna get rich sex. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Truth be told, Future's songs where he goes in this direction are some of his worst tracks, some of his most boring tracks, and he's decided to come out with those kinds of songs for over an hour, which of course is going to make this his worst record. This is not good. That kind of does it for highlights to me on this record. The other tracks that I mentioned earlier were really some of the lowest points here, and meanwhile the other cuts just fall somewhere in the middle. Like many of these other suddenly dropped collaborative albums from top-name rappers, this thing is very much a mixed bag. It feels rushed. It's not nearly as sharp as like a Without Warning, or especially a Kids See Ghosts. Doesn't really feel all that collaborative a lot of the time, while there are some good standouts here where Future and Juice WRLD do find some cool creative overlap. For the most part, just kind of seems like both guys riffing on some very dime a dozen trap beats, with a supremely good flow, hook or instrumental popping out here and there. I'm feeling a decent 2 strong 5 on this Wizard thing. Really does anything all that novel in the grander scheme of things for Future, but I do think he layers, matures, and refines his sound to the point where it's a bit more dynamic. There's a little more subtlety to it. There's a little more nuance to it. You can kind of dive into some of these tracks and get some interesting details out of them. I also think Future provides some really sticky and memorable hooks on this thing too. Gives some good vocal performances, emotional and aggressive. And I'm actually monstrously happy about that. I'm happy to hear a Future project that I can enjoy more than just a couple of tracks at a time and that's it. While sure, still he's not the most versatile artist under the sun, and I do think the album does have some serious lyrical shortcomings. The start of it is pretty weak. The ending of it is kind of weak as well, but that is not stopping me from feeling a light to decent 7. Sure, there are highlights on this 70-minute record, but a vast majority of what's here could have been left on the cutting room floor or could have been redone. After The Wizard, I just don't get this sudden drop in quality here. Future's debut album isn't even 10 years old at this point. There's no reason that he shouldn't still be experimenting, evolving, and putting out his best stuff, but instead he's just running off of the fumes of copying and pasting a bunch of ideas that he helped popularize years ago. Feeling a decent 2 strong 3 on this one. I just feel like this is a very wishy-washy, mediocre batch of songs that vary pretty wildly in quality. There are a few bangers, there are a few highlights, but at the end of the day, the biggest failure of this LP is that it didn't end up being greater than the sum of its parts. Bringing Uzi and Future together for the length of an entire record essentially does nothing. It doesn't create anything we haven't heard before. It doesn't make Future sound different. It doesn't make Uzi sound different. In fact, I think it illustrates just how, I guess, one-dimensional their respective styles really are. Feeling a strong 4 to a light 5 on Those are essentially my thoughts on this LP. Yeah, is it one of Future's better projects? I think so, but it's still kind of a mixed bag and sees Future, I think, lazily sauntering through some tracks, also hitting us with some bad and ridiculous and sometimes tasteless ideas on others. But that's something for me I sort of expect at this point, and I know is going to be a turnoff for me going into projects like this. But if that's not the case for you, that's not going to be a barrier to enjoyment for you on this project for sure. But again, personally, I'm feeling a strong 5 to a light 6 on
the record. In my opinion, does not have the strongest first leg, and there are a few songs here and there that I think serve as potholes in the overall runtime of the album. But the bop to flop ratio overall is still very good. And once again, I think Future and Metro are doing some of their best stuff together here. I mean, this is handily some of the hottest shit Future has been on since like the Monster era, which is why I'm feeling a strong 7 to a light 8.
On this bad, I suppose. You can end it however you want, as long as it ends. But yeah, outside of a couple of pretty good songs and a handful of decent cuts, this record was painfully underwhelming and mid. One of the most disappointing groupings of tracks Metro or Future have put their hands on, and absolutely positively not holding a candle to the original We Don't Trust You, that is for sure. Which is why I'm feeling a strong 2 to a light 3 on outside of a couple of standout tracks. I'm really just at a loss with this tape. The beats range from average to just unfitting for Future style. The flows, for the most part, are forgettable. The hooks, I mean, much of the time, what hooks? The content is pretty much what's to be expected in terms of like the topics Future is usually addressing. There are most definitely some moments of emotional intensity where Future is, going into some introspective spots, but in no way is he at his most witty or funny or charismatic on Mixtape Pluto. If there are any great tracks on it, they're really in the first several songs, which is why I'm feeling a strong 3 to a light 4 on this thing.